James was born with a disorder of sexual development known as hypogonadism.
I was unusually docile, unusually ability to be manipulated very easily. You're going to alter the brain, the everything about that child, and turn that child into something we have never quite ever had on this planet. Somebody who is one sex and getting the hormones of the other sex and never went through the puberty. Blocking puberty makes you very docile. Block puberty makes you vulnerable. It makes you prone to suggestion. You can manipulate them very easily. You can turn them into anything you want. They don't have the capacity to understand any of this. You've taken away that capacity, altering them to the point that they can never go back. So they're stuck in this sort of Frankenstein stuff. It's going to end in a lot of suffering, and somebody's going to have to explain to these kids why they did that when they're kids, why they're kids.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beyond Gender. Today we have a fascinating guest, James Linehan. James was born with a disorder of sexual development known as hypogonadism and was treated for the condition 40 years ago, well before the trans phenomena became what it is today. Welcome to the show, James.
Thank you.
Maybe we could just start off by you telling your story.
Okay, so I grew up quite some time ago now, and I was born basically in the Bay Area, and during childhood, which I had a really nice, wonderful childhood because we played a lot and did a lot of those things. But as the other students started to grow and they started to mature slowly through junior high, I did not mature like my peers. I maintained a kind of a childlike face. I was I was emotionally stunted, and I also had many learning disabilities. So I was stuck in special education. I was as if I was, I guess you would call it, stuck on level 1 and never able to get to level 2. So every time I'd go through, I would never get up to any levels. It was like everything was completely halted. I was just halted in time. And, my mother really didn't, I was just her child, so she didn't really, she's, oh, he's my father. She thought I was wonderful, whatever it was, but that's my mother. My father got a little, my father's got a little concerned because he was a physician. And so he took me to just a general doctor. And at the time I was around 16 because I was really boyish looking. I mean, the kids were much taller than me by then. I just felt and I looked and I behaved and I played with toys much younger than myself.
Could I ask you something there? First of all, did you say general doctor, not gender doctor? Yeah.
No. Yes, general doctor. I'm sorry. See, genders, not a gender doctor, a GP, a general. There was no gender doctor back.
No, I just want to clarify that just in case. The second question was, there you are at 16, kind of playing toys. I've seen kids like this, playing at a much younger age. Kind of you're kind of very immature is usually what the phrase is used. You know what I mean? That you're physically undeveloped. Were you cognizant of it, if you follow me, or because you were childlike, were you kind of childlike in your understanding of your lack of development?
How can I say? It was like I was something different. I felt I was something different. I was just like that the way I was. And I enjoyed being like that. I enjoyed the toys. I enjoyed the extended play. I would play with boys and girls, and the girls would have me over, and I was just not really I didn't understand, other adults would kind of, why was I playing with the girls and the boys? But to me, it was just all child's play. I just enjoyed their company. I enjoyed fantasies. I enjoyed doing things like what children do. But again, they knew I was older. I was much older than them, yet I kind of looked younger. So I thought there was something going on because my other friends were getting on to other stuff. They're getting rid of their child toys. They're talking about girls. They're getting more rough and tumble, and I just didn't want to do that. I just didn't have any desire to do that. So that's how I would describe it, because the problem with they were going through puberty, but remember, puberty starts slowly, and it's a long process through the 9, 8, or 10, and you get a little bit of hormones, and nothing was going on. It was completely stopped. So I was stuck without any sort of hormones whatsoever. My body was essentially starved of hormones.
Wow.
So I was unusually docile, unusually ability to be manipulated very easily. I remember some kids told me to go throw a fire cracker over a fence, and I just did that because I was just this kid, and suddenly fire started. Luckily, they put it out. They put it out quickly, and and my mother was very upset and calls everybody in. Big thing. So I did not know what happened. So
this seems really important, and maybe we'll get into it later. Just the idea that without puberty happening, you're extra gullible and manipulable.
Yes.
Maybe we can save that for when we start talking about Lupron and intentionally blocking puberty, whereas you just had your puberty blocked by an anomalous condition.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yes. Yeah. So, I was very, very manipulable, very suggestible. And at that age, when you're pre-adolescent, you're supposed to be that. You're supposed to do what everybody around, all the adults, want you to do, because you're essentially defenseless. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't start like gazelles. We don't know what the hell we're doing until our society tells us what we're doing. So that went on for quite some time. So then my father was getting a little bit concerned, mainly because other doctors were commenting about my obvious childlike behavior and look, and the fact that I couldn't. I seemed very, very immature for my age. So he took me to a general. They call it GPs. They're just general doctors. They do physicals. Gender. It was all sex or sex orientation back then. There was no such thing as gender, really. So he took me to there, and he kind of looked at me, and then he finally. I mean, I went to other doctors, and then finally they said, "Can you take your drawers down?" Because back then they were kind of paranoid because it was during it was during another scandal. I forgot. It was during the abuse of children started going up. So doctors were really paranoid about looking at genitals or anything like that. But he did, and he noticed that I wasn't my one thing about having it is having what is called a micropenis, a penis that just doesn't grow at all. It's just like a baby's size of a baby's. There's no. It's barely there. It's just bare. There's no pubic hair. There's no hair on it. There's no signs of puberty. So then he said, okay, so we're going to have to get you up to University of California, San Francisco, because they have a metabolical thing, is figure out why you're not going through puberty. So of course my father was again he wasn't angry with me. He was angry with the doctors again, because that's doctors. He said, well, they should have picked this up earlier. They should have picked this up at 16. And that's what he said. They're not doing their job. So anyway, he drove me down there, and they, the first thing they do is they say, they will take you and they will start doing things like they will start taking blood tests to see what kind of levels you are. They take chromosomes. They will put you in a X-ray machine and an MRI. So I just went through all sorts of, because they got to figure out why because if my pituitary is not starting, means there may be a tumor there that's just causing something, or there's some other disorder. Maybe chromosomes are duplicated, or maybe I'm not responding to androgen as I should. So there's all sorts of stuff they have to eliminate. So that was the first time I started being completely medicalized. So I had to go there like at one time every 3 or 4 times a month to go through all these tests. And they eventually concluded that for some unknown reason, my pituitary gland is not producing the LH and the FH hormones. And so the pituitary gland sits on top of here, and it's the primary organ that controls the entire endocrine system. So it's a general. It's in charge. It starts the hormone process that is known as puberty. And what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to pulse out hormones to tell the gonads whether they're male or female, with these 2 hormones, which are LH and FH, and they're both luteinizing, and the two main hormones pulse out in a pulsing, and it starts very slow when it's around 9 or 10, and it starts pulsing, and then your gonads become stimulated, and they start the process of fertilization, the initial process to get you fertile, and they start the androgen, and if you're a boy, androgen starts, and an estrogen starts if you're a girl. And this is what we know as puberty, because all of this process goes through the brain, produces the hormones which tell the gonads to produce the sex-based hormones, and during that time, the pituitary gland acts essentially like a conductor of an orchestra, and it tells this player to play and this player to play, and it just tells, because it's a symphony of hormones, my physician says, and this is critical to start puberty. And then they told my mom is that the reason why he's so immature, inability to take instruction, remember instructions, process complex emotions, temper tantrums, all of that stuff, is because the wiring that wires both the emotions and the ability of the cognitive in front of the structure in front of you is not connected. So the process is here, and the emotions are not talking to each other. So It's just that's what basically a child is. It's just these emotions pop up, and there's nothing to control them. It just boom, right out the mouth, or
everything you just mentioned, the ability to process emotions, complex thinking, and a few of the other things you mentioned are all necessary ingredients of therapy, or at least a certain type of therapy.
My God.
And so if a child is on or puberty blockers, or has their puberty just blocked through some condition, it's going to radically change how we work with them as in the realm of psychotherapy.
Yeah. See, I don't know how you would therapy a child. Therapy on children would be very different, I think, because
it's ridiculously different. Yeah. Like usually, they don't have the complexity. So usually, like, I don't work with under 12s, but if you were, it's often art therapy or play therapy, because they don't have the complexity. Yeah.
Yes.
They don't have the
so
complex understanding or ability to put it into words. And I've met kids who are in their teens, early teens, and I've said to the parent, listen, I'm going to work with you. They haven't yet developed the complexity or insight that is necessary for me to work with them effectively. Like they're still childlike in the way. It was a kind of a well-known story with among therapists, where this therapist was talking to two boys who'd had a traumatic event, and they were probably like you, but they were 10 or 11 or whatever, and she explained how you had to, talk about these things, and these things really matter. And then after the end of all the kind of giving them a big spiel about how they had to talk about their feelings, she said, so boys, do you want to tell us how you feel? And the first one said, I feel hungry. And then the second boy said, I feel tired. And that would be, the childlike kind of understanding of kids. If you're trying to get into complex emotions, they haven't got that door opened. And you were 16 by the sounds of it, and that door wasn't opened. And no more than the puberty blocked adolescent, they don't know what they're missing. So why would they, they don't know what they're missing because they haven't got the complexity to understand what they're missing.
I enjoyed how I was, but I knew I was very, very different. So I wasn't like, oh my God, I should be doing this and doing that. I didn't even have any desire to do those things. I just had desire to play with my He-Man toys. That's the only desire I had. So, and that's what Dr. Connie at the time told my mother. He said, well, you're expecting him to do this, this, and this, and he just doesn't. He's like childlike. His mind is like a childlike because it hasn't gotten any hormones to tell it otherwise, to be anything else. And so the hormones are the things that are the primary things that cause these connections in the brain to develop. There's no other. The brain just doesn't just sit there and develop. It's got to have hormones. It's got to, okay, are we going out of the child stage and into the adolescent stage, and from the adolescent stage to the adult stage? These are all within the evolutionary framework of how Homo sapiens evolve in society, and it's all critical on hormones and processes like that, because if you don't have them, they never start. So anyway, so I can start with when I first started androgen, which was a interesting experience. So
before you do, I want to bring it to everybody, to listeners and viewers' mind, that when just because a lot of people would be interested in this point, when an adolescent who had their puberty stopped, unlike you, if they've been, chemically stopped with puberty blockers, they never go into a natural biological puberty. They go into a chemically induced puberty of the opposite sex. And we don't know what is the difference. We do know the difference between chemical food and organic food. So we have an idea that there could be something missing. But if you think about it, there is a lot of people who have transitioned, who've had their puberty blocked. They've never actually gone into their fully human, going towards an adult puberty. What they've got into is a chemically induced puberty of the opposite sex, and off they go, continuing in the opposite sex in a chemically induced manner. It's just a very, very important point, because I'm like, they'd never actually gone through biological puberty.
Yeah. So the cross-sex hormones don't work on. So androgen works on males and estrogen works on females. And in the androgen in females does a little bit of strength, and the estrogen in males does a little bit of skin so soft stuff. But that's it. You don't need the other sex's hormones. You could be perfectly happy just androgen or just estrogen. Wow. So there's no. I mean, you do get strength. Like, for instance, if you had no androgen, if you would not get any acne, your skin would be completely soft. You'd be weaker, but you would be you'd be basically female with normal sexual functions. They've known it for quite some time.
Wow.
They've known this from other disorders like complete androgen sensitivity disorders, where they have these women who are supposed to be men, who are biologically men, but they have no masculine or anything, and they test as if they were born female. They just can't have children, and these are kind of
wow.
These are very odd cases. So
we're overloading people with a hormone that don't even really need. I mean, they could actually do without the cross-sex hormone, and instead we're giving them massive doses of it.
No, the cross-sex hormones, are sex-based hormones, are specifically to your sex. So there's no, and this is they're not on HRT. They're on cross-sex hormones. They're using a hormone out of their sex, and what hormones do, as I said before, is they change brain structures. They mature you. They also change secondary and primary physical aspects of yourself. So when the estrogen starts maturing the body and the mind of the female, and the androgen matures the body and the mind of the male. That's all they do. And if you switch that, you're doing something else. And I'm not sure exactly what they do. I have a suspicion that they're creating something. They're not treating something, but I'll tell that later. So when I started androgen, what they do is they basically do much like they just give you a little bit and see what happens, and then they test your blood to make sure that the androgen helped. And it was like, I don't know if you've been like really thirsty, like desperately thirsty, and you've had water, and you're really dehydrated, and you drink water, and it's like just goes. That's how I felt when I first had it. It was like my body was just utterly starving for something. And as soon as it got it, it just goes, oh, okay. It's like the cells were able to wake up. And within 6 months, I would say 6 months, I was a completely different person. I was looking at my toys. I was like, why did I play all these toys? It was like, because they kind of, they see, when you normally go through puberty, you go through a little bit, and it's like cranks up so much. You're not noticing the puberty start until it really kicks in. But you're actually going through a little bit of hormone puberty during 8, 7. It's just leaking out. So I started at 16, and suddenly we're going. We just put the gas.
I imagine you were looking at girls a little bit differently. Did that happen too?
Yeah, that definitely happened. Yes, they, suddenly it's like, oh, okay, I see why now. Yes. Well, they're not just. It's like you kind of like when you're before it. It's like I fancied them. But I was not. I didn't understand. They would joke about breasts as boys would do, and I would nod along. I wasn't quite sure because I kind of thought they were cute. I wasn't sexually attracted to them. I didn't have any sort of sexual attraction to them.
Kids are cute, like you thought of them as just pretty.
Yes,
you know what I mean. Without
pretty, cute. That's it. But as soon as the androgen hit, then it was like this popped of this, and it took me a while to negotiate all of these extra emotions. So it was because I became very aggressive, and then I tuned that down, and then I had to, boys get, God, you just gotta, boys need more counseling when they go through puberty. But anyway, so it's just
but seriously, it was actually boys going through puberty, they get, as I've really learned to kind of respect testosterone over the last few years. I read Carol Hooven's book on testosterone, which was really good insight into the impact of testosterone. But as well as that, talking to women who have been on testosterone, transitioners and detransitioners, and it's a bit of a beast. Like, testosterone. It kind of comes upon you and wallops you. It completely takes over. I know young boys, you can see the difference from the kind of soft, gentle little boys to these, and they become aggressive. And I just feel it must be actually very disconcerting. And women have their own thing, and I had very low puberty, but to be talking about specifically male puberty, I actually think it's pretty extraordinary what boys go through.
Right. Yeah. You're kind of aggressive. Girls are scared of you from that. I used to get bullied a lot, and then I grew up real quick. And that's something no one left. Everybody left me alone because now I'm. So it was a completely different social experience as well. And I still miss the innocent days of playing with the toys and the girls and stuff like that. I look fondly on that, but it was a different world. It was a different world. But my brain started, again, I had a lot of catch up to do. And the other thing that which later I found out is when you go through I went through it's called a medically induced puberty. You don't go through it with your peers. So when you mature, when you're a girl or a boy, the girls go through all their, puberty with their peers. So they learn from their peers about what it's like to grow through adolescence to adulthood. Same with boys. Boys go through it and they get, and men should monitor them and kind of mentor them, and women should monitor and mentor the women, because it's a very, very different process with different goals and stuff like that. Well, I did not go through that. I showed up in a hospital and with little doctors, and
wow.
they would look at you and they would measure hair. They had to measure everything. It was you had no boundaries. They had to measure everything because they have to have this huge checklist. I mean, it's really obvious to put a boy through. You make sure that you're hitting these certain marks, and then at that mark you increase androgen a little bit more, and then you hit a bunch of other marks. So they have this whole checklist.
Were they measuring your pubic hair or your hair on your head?
The genitals, everything. They're looking at how much hair, where the hair is going. They're testing for liver. They're sending to the cardiologist. They're sending me to neurological different specialties to see, because androgen, they told me that we can't mimic puberty, even though I'm a male. We can hit your milestones, and and we can hit the main parts, but we can't mimic natural puberty, because natural puberty is based individually on your body, and your pituitary gland measures, but we have to do that ourselves, and we're not as good. So but we have to do this. So it was more like, we have to do this, or else if you go on much further, you'll develop osteoporosis, which was a serious thing that continuously did bone density stuff on me. You have to do it before, because males lose sexual function permanently if they don't get androgen by a certain age. The cells freeze up. But again, they said we don't want to turn you into a medical patient, which will permanently medical patient, but we have to avoid all these other serious issues, because they really wanted my pituitary gland to start if I'm late or not, or something else is going on. So anyway, that's what
So just to kind of put this in context, you're saying that we can't even mimic a sex-appropriate puberty, and yet now we're trying to mimic the puberty of the opposite sex.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes it even more.
You're not actually mimicking a puberty. You're doing something else. So you can't give me estrogen and I won't go through puberty. What will happen is I will look female, or look female-ish, or I'll look feminine or something like that. But I won't go through puberty, because like when I go through androgen, remember that just all my physical and mental stuff matures, because it's all sensitive to androgen. My fertility stays childlike. It never starts. Okay. So I'm you're permanently infertile because you have to start the pituitary gland, because that's the thing that will stimulate the gonads to produce fertility. So the testicles remain baby-like because everything else is growing. So
wow.
So in order for me to become fertile, I have to go back and get different hormones. I'll have to get the this is from my physician who went through this. This is a 25-year-old letter talking about exactly. I've arrived basically. This is from Fitzgerald at the Endocrine Medical Center from University of California, San Francisco. So this is a clinic that Jack Turbin currently. This will become the clinic that Jack Turbin is currently the head of.
And what does that letter say?
Basically, says that I am I have matured to the point of that he thinks I should induce fertility now, and in order for me to induce fertility, I have to replace the HGC and the stimulating hormones that my pituitary gland did not. So I have to start I have to put hormones in myself to stimulate my gonads to produce a fertility. So they will produce sperm. And he's saying that this is a theoretical process, and he's not sure how much sperm I could produce because even I think I was around 25 or something. But since I wasn't started young enough, I didn't go through puberty. The fertility is infertile, but it's technically possible. It's theoretically possible for me to have children because, and this is a point that I really bothered me because I kept seeing them say puberty blockers don't cause infertility. You saw that many times, and they do cause. That's the main function of them. There's no other. They've always known this. There's that is
basically, if you go through puberty to a certain point, you can be past the point of no return, and you've created infertility. Or you've blocked fertility.
Well, so when I get androgen, it's skipping my pituitary gland, and my pituitary gland produces two hormones. The two hormones do two things. They cause the gonads to produce fertility, sperm or egg, and the second is and a byproduct of that is androgen or estrogen for females. So these things happen simultaneously. Eggs and estrogen, and on the side, sperm and androgen. So when you go through a puberty like I do, you skip one part and you just replace the androgen or the androgen. You're skipping this whole process here. You're skipping the pituitary, the signals that go down here. So you're already infertile. So you're already infertile. So does that make sense?
Wow.
This is a very important point.
Yeah, it does. And to use your analogy before of a symphony, it sounds like if a puberty is blocked for various reasons, it's like at least half the orchestra is going to be playing at a different tempo. They're going to start at a different time, and it's going to affect the entire musical composition. It's going to be whack.
Yeah. So it would be like this. It's playing, and then mine didn't start playing. The puberty blocker, actually, the symphony is playing, and then it's like someone pulled the plug. So in the middle of the symphony, so that it just goes dead. Mine never started. My conductor never arrived. So this would be like, okay, your pituitary is not playing anything, so we need to put speakers in there and play the music for the symphony. But the symphony never plays. It's artificial music or artificial hormones that do what the symphony should have done, but without the symphony playing, you can never have fertility. So you have to go through your natal puberty the way your pituitary gland starts it to become fertile. There's no other way around that.
Mm. Now, what occurs to me is that some of the people who will describe puberty blockers as just putting a pause on things will also describe conditions like yours, hypogonadism, as intersex, and then they will also talk about intersex as kind of it's like a way of saying that sex is just a spectrum, or it's not a binary, and there's this whole use of intersex, quote unquote, for political or ideological reasons. And it's
okay. Yeah. So, so there's disorders of sex development. Okay. And I have one of them, which is the least, it is the one that just basically means that we just don't go through puberty. What they're talking about are what are called primary, I had secondary hypogonadism, means my pituitary gland, but they're talking about people with double an extra chromosome like XXY, where there's an error in the cell, and another X goes on, and it just, what it does is it causes the gonads to not be able to respond to hormones as efficiently as they could. So they end up getting a bunch of odd amounts of hormones, and they go through puberty, but it's kind of in between, kind of like too little hormones or too much hormones. So these individuals, most of them are just simply they have health issues and some fertility issues. For instance, they don't talk about the fact that Klinefelter's often occurs with problems with kidneys. Some of the other ones, the really odd ones called the mosaic conditions, have heart problems. Some of them have all sorts of other health issues that they never talk about, because these are developmental health issues. These are developmental problems. They have nothing to do with the binary of sex. They just have to do when things go wrong. There's many, many, many things like Down syndrome and all sorts of, there's thousands of chromosomes problems out there. People with height, they grow too much, they grow too little, they're born without arms. So there's all sorts of other things that we just accept as normal aberrations of human development, which we don't really, we just adopt them. It's when it comes to sex, people have all these strange ideas. Yeah.
Does it run in families at all? I remember Aaron Kimberly, who has a DSD. He seemed to have an aunt, or he or she spoke about an aunt that also had the DSD. Do you think, has it ran in your family, or is that a wild guess?
My specific one, they don't know. They don't think so. There is a condition called Kalman syndrome that certainly does run in families, which is the other form. This contains where the child cannot go through puberty and can't smell. They can't smell, and sometimes they're born without kidneys, and they can have a bit of mental. They can be a little bit more. The mental capacity can be challenged a little bit. So that's a genetic version of mine, but mine is unknown. Why I just, it just happens, because I actually did the research and it never came back with anything. They just not quite sure how it happens.
So the people who you were treating you sound like they were conscientious professionals who were trying to help you with a, physical anomaly, a condition. And that's not my impression of people who are doing gender medicine right now. And I'm just wondering, how is it that endocrinologists are, I don't know, capable of doing the type of conscientious medicine that they were trying to practice with you, and then also doing something that does not look like that at all, at least to me.
This is kind of perplexing to me. I think what's happened is some sort of, I don't know, some sort of belief has taken over, and the endocrinologists, there were always kind of endocrinologists back then. There were always a section of them that were a bit of a mad scientists who did things like give women growth hormones and played around with these things. And there were also another sect that serviced the transsexual community, and they were back then. But these were always outside of standard medicine, so they were never let in the room. They were like, okay, that's fine. You just stay over there. Don't corrupt our medical practices over here. So for some reason, those people came in to and became part of the medical establishment. So we have a bunch of kind of mad scientists and sort of the surgeons coming in and developing this program. And I was looking at it, and I was trying to figure out, why would you block a person's puberty at such a vulnerable stage when they know all this stuff could happen? And because the demands of even the transsexual community weren't that bad. I mean, I went back there and I read that, and they would rather become women earlier, but they didn't say that early. They weren't meaning like children.
Yeah.
But for some reason, that just somehow, it's like this kind of this concept creep, where in the late 90s, they had the first block puberty, and that was because they just figured they could get a better looking person, like who looked like they passed. But again, I really think it's just certain types of men who have fetishes and have AGPs and stuff like that. They can become very they can fetishize and visualize themselves as kids, and think, well, if I just did that as a kid, then I wouldn't be this way today, or I wouldn't be this anxious or whatever today. And I think they just projected that onto these kids, because I've heard all these, these cross-sexing or AGPs, and they describe, this stuff about putting kids on puberty blockers, and it just makes no sense. I don't know why people listen to them. I don't know why you're paying attention to them. They have other problems. The problems isn't their puberty. The problems is the way gender is processed in their mind. So it's very disturbing, because it seems like they want to create trans kids. They actually want to interfere by doing this. You can create a trans kid if you stop their puberty and you put cross-sex hormones. You're going to alter the brain, the everything about that child, and turn that child into something we have never quite ever had on this planet. Somebody who is one sex and getting the hormones of the other sex, and never went through the puberty of the natal sex. So their natal sex has been suppressed almost completely, particularly with puberty blockers, completely.
Yeah, I'd like to pause on that, because I've spoken to quite a few people and I've worked with quite a few people who've been blocked. Their puberty has been blocked, and then they have gone over to a chemically induced puberty of the opposite sex, and then on into cross-sex hormones, and off they go. And so they might be technically 26 years old or 24, 28, but actually they've never gone through human development into adulthood. What they've gone into is a chemically development into adulthood. And we don't know what that is. You're highlighting it, James, and I'm glad you are, but we don't actually know what they're missing, and we don't know what they're gaining when they have this process. And I do know that enough to know that, when the brain is kind of going through adolescence, the human brain It's complexifying. It's not growing, it's complexifying. And all that complexification that happens, I don't know if it happens in the chemically induced puberty. We don't know, you know what I mean? We don't know what actually is being lost and what's being gained. That you were going through it of the same sex, and you were going through it because of your own medical condition. But we're doing this arbitrarily, I would argue, to children of the opposite sex, so they're missing all sorts. But when a person goes through puberty, they also start to not only fall in love, which is a very complex process, but when you fall in love, you start to kind of complexify your understanding of other humans. And when you actually have a love relationship, you really complexify, because you learn to give and take, and learn that I really dislike this person, but I also love them. You learn the huge what it is to be human in this whole process. But as well as that, I always think of during puberty is when you often first, appreciate beauty and poetry and films and books and all that depth. And it's like the beginnings of the wanting to pair bond, this fall in love and have a pair, have a mate for life. That's all happening during the adolescence, the complexification. And with that need to pair bond, you're moving out of the childhood, I want to play with my He-Man toys, and you're into it's a bittersweet condition of being human, which is wanting a mate who knows and loves you, but also awareness that you die alone and you never will really truly have one, but you want to try and have one. It's so complex, and that's what they're kind of going through between 10 and 20. And with that, ultimately, we settle into our adult selves in a much more deeper understanding of our profound imperfections, because we've fallen in love a couple of times, or once, or on some level, and we've realized how much we're lacking, how much everybody's lacking. All of that, I think, is profoundly important to being a human. And I really worry about these kids who've never had that experience. You have an understanding of it. And I just think it's very important to kind of hear now.
Yeah.
How did you, from 16 onwards, how did it go for you? Because it must have been unusual.
Yeah, it was unusual. It took me a long time because I had to learn from my peers, calibrate, do all that stuff, learn how to approach women and all that without scaring them away, and do all that kind of stuff. And I had to do that later, and they've already gone through it, and I'm like, okay, now what do? I don't do it. So, so I was a little lost, but I kind of caught up, because it takes a lot of nuance and a lot of understanding and a lot of, observation of people's behavior. And I just, and this has been reported, like, for instance, I believe they did a survey. They like people with my condition, and they found there was like 90% of us don't have our own children. There was like 5 times the rate of people have no relationship whatsoever, because they all felt like me, lost, left behind. And some of them just never recovered, or they got it too late.
And never learned to pair bond.
Yeah, maybe they never learned to pair bond.
Yeah.
So they were all, I mean, it was comforting, because I understood a lot of difficulties. Like, for instance, if I go into a men's locker room, I still get scared when I undress in front of them, because I was an adolescent and I would undress and I would be immature. So I still have that brain. It still speaks to me. And I kind of said, no, I've already matured. I don't, like that. So those are the sort of things that just keep with me for the rest of my life. And this is just standard medication. This is a standard medical. We know where I am and what's going on with me. I mean, we're dealing with detransitioners who we don't know what's basically. That's why doctors don't want to deal with them, because, like, what do I do with this person? I don't know what their outcomes are. I don't know what they've done. And it's just, and the other thing is, when I hear these doctors talk about, well, their penis is not big enough yet. I say, God, that's like when you hear that from a 16 or 17-year-old and you're doing that surgery, that's a child that has been their whole development pattern has been disordered. They have a disordered development pattern. They're not. We don't, and the physical stuff. I've learned this in biology. I think you can maybe from Colin Wright, you can learn more of that. Why the physical manifestations of things represent the mental manifestation. There's no difference between the two. So if you see somebody who is immature, or has immature or genitalia that's not mature, there's also something inside of them hasn't matured either. It's not just physical; it's both. So so there's something about these kids that are just not. They're not growing up. It's like the Lost Boys. We're stuck. Like puberty blockers are like Tinkerbell, and they're in Never Land of gender affirming hair flying around with, Captain meanwhile,
Hook, the doctor,
Captain Hook, and the evil of time and the crocodiles coming, and they're just in the fantasy world.
Yeah, and in Neverland, there's a lot of difficulty in distinguishing between the imaginary and the real, and they're kind of conflated in that story. And I see a lot of that happening, now with a lot of people who cannot distinguish between fantasy and reality. And
it's quite a mess. But I admire you professionals going out there and.
Did you say five times the rate of people with your condition? They're 5 times more likely not to have a mate or something like that, not to have a partner.
5 times more likely to never have a mate, basically virgins. So 5 times the rate. I can send you the study. It was a psychosexual study of people with my condition and their emotional challenges. And,
even though they catch up in the end, the disorder
you're never able to catch up. Some of them were a little late because you only have a minimum time, but most of them went up, but they still struggle as 60-year-olds with this kind of condition, and that's a problem. See, gender dysphoria and these things are mental conditions. They can subside, they can go away, but once you start injecting puberty blockers and all this other stuff, you're stuck with that stuff. That's never going to go away. It's never going to.
So we're producing gender dysphoria in our supposed attempt to heal it.
Yes.
Oh my God.
I think unfortunately, I think that was intentional. I don't see any other way, because they know puberty. They know what happens. They know what happens to the brain for quite some time. They know what happens to fertility and all that. And if you read the stuff, they just kind of gloss it over, or it's just like this. It's just they don't. You can see where it's lost, or they don't want to talk about it. It's very bizarre. It's very bizarre medical stuff. So, yeah.
We're coming towards the end. I'm wondering, when did you first discover the trans phenomenon, and how did you register it? Because I presume it hit you hard.
The trans phenomenon. Okay, first thing I've known what we call transsexuals. Actually, they were AGPs. I've known quite a lot of them for quite some time, for over 40 years. They never, I always, like, for instance, I think they were AGP, like 3 of them, and they would come in dresses and they would say hi, and they were never. I just read them as heterosexual men who like to dress, and that's all they told themselves. They were just heterosexual men, like to dress. If you felt uncomfortable, they felt like, oh well, I should explain myself better. They never were pushy or anything, or they were very fantasy. They were very intelligent, and they all had these fantastic jobs like government. So they never talked about anything. But when the trans phenomena started coming on around 2013, 2014, I started noticing videos about androgen. I'm like going, this is bizarre. And,
wow.
I said, no, androgen actually develops the skeleton, and it's not like they compared it to antihistamines. They were minimizing sex hormones and all this stuff quite drastically, as if this is some sort of like makeup product or something. And then after that, I had to learn all the transsexual, because I did not know all like male to female and all that stuff. I learned all of that stuff, and then they said puberty blockers, and like going, why would you, what are you doing with puberty? And I had to, it took me a good year. And finally I found a few things to try to, you mean they're actually blocking people's puberty for this kind of stuff? That is just wacko. That's like you've been with diabetes all your life, and you're injecting yourself, and you turn on the station, and suddenly everybody's taking their kids down to give them diabetes. I'm like, going, what are you doing?
I had the similar experience. I was walking down a street in London, because I was only starting doing this film in 2018 when they told me this concept, and I was shot. It was like, how could you do that? That's blocking their sexual development. It's blocking their development. Like, I had the very same like heart attack feeling of it. But according to WPATH, you said this yourself earlier, James, so I'm not naming you, but I'm highlighting it. You would be, according to WPATH and their crazy identities, you would be a naturally occurring eunuch. Is that right?
Yes, I would be a naturally occurring eunuch. Yes, I would be I would have gone down there and said, your puberty is blocked naturally. Go pick up a trophy. I mean, I would be a naturally occurring eunuch. They have there's three other types of eunuchs. There's naturally occurring eunuch, and there's eunuchs that are done physically, where they actually castrate them for boys and it's other things. I mean, this is a horrendous practice, and somehow it's glossed over. I've even heard academics gloss over it too. But the turning a boy into a eunuch is 70% of them bleed to death, and so that's Rome for you. This castration, and although castration cults and this kind of phenomena has been done since antiquity. I mean,
it's the cult of Cybele and Attis would be one of those cults.
Yes,
yeah, and it was part of being one of the priests.
Mm-hmm. And then there's there's a Scotsese, and there's all sorts of castration cults. So
yeah,
wow,
castration cults. All purity and all problems are related to the genitals. So they remove them and they become pure. It's quite circumcision was based on a kind of a castration type. It was like we don't want to castrate you. We want to, it was done with priests for in Egypt to separate the priests from the normal. So this type of thinking has been going on for quite some time. It's a very religious type of thinking.
You said earlier, kind of related to it, is that you were particularly gullible, particularly biddable, particularly manipulatable, if you follow me. And both you and Brett, you both took up on it, saying, that feels very relevant to this. I thought you also mentioned being docile, and I find that the trans people that I've met who've gone through puberty blockers are notably docile, notably passive, and they don't kick off. It's really noticeable. Where I'm like, where's your anger? What have they done to you? And they don't seem to have their anger. They haven't found their anger.
Yeah. No, blocking puberty makes you very docile. Block puberty makes you vulnerable. It makes you prone to suggestion. You can manipulate them very easily. You can tell them things and they think it's coming from them. So that's why I think this is quite diabolical, because if you block them, you can turn them blockage. You can turn them into anything you want. You can make them into non-binary. You can make them into they don't have the capacity to understand any of this. They haven't. You've taken away that capacity. So I don't know if these people are just caught up in this, or these physicians understand that they're actually imposing this type of thinking onto these kids and chemically altering their bodies, and then altering them to the point that they can never go back. So they're stuck in this strange land of and they're infertile, and you also heard of they're not having any sexual function. Supposedly, according to Marcy Bowers, she, they, them. I don't know about pronouns anymore. I think I just use them all. So that none of them have any sexual function, and it's like, yeah, you should have known that. That's part of standard endocrinology 101.
Wow.
Known that for like quite some time. So why would you say, oh my God, this is happening, when you've known it all along? And that's why this is a very, very strange medical, because this is something not like anything else we've seen. With lobotomies, they have no idea what the brain did, really. And so the rest were just walking into ignorance. This is walking out of knowledge into ignorance, and then,
oh my God,
imagining a way of creating these trans childs. And it requires a lot of, it's beyond me, but
I can't help but thinking that I forget her name, but the wife of Percy Bysshe Shelley, the author of Frankenstein.
Mary.
But Mary Shelley, thank you, was so prescient. I mean, she was kind of warning us against these types of things, this Promethean hubristic attitude that we're just going to experiment and kind of put ourselves in the position of God and just, create these new beings. And it's like, there's such a shadow of tragedy and human suffering behind it all, you know?
Yeah. But we have no idea what's going to happen in the future when they get to 40, 50, or middle age, because, the endocrine system, unfortunately, just like that ticking clock in the alligator and Peter Pan, it's ticking and it's going to go off. I mean, like, for instance, I got rheumatoid arthritis, which is directly related to my hormone deficiency. And, I've had other issues, plus, all relatively easy to treat, but still, I spend $60,000 or $70,000 in insurance every year, because the rheumatoid arthritis medication is $7,000. Well,
jeez,
we in the United States, we try to bankrupt our sick. So this. It just leads to so many different problems, just so many actual problems, because it's not only that, but when you go through puberty, your immune system develops. The immune system goes from a child's immune system, which is everything's an enemy, to a more tuned immune system where only certain things I should fight. So all processes mature during puberty. And doing it yourself, or doing this sort of Frankenstein stuff, is going to end in a lot of suffering. And somebody's going to have to explain to these kids why they did that when they're kids, why they're kids. I mean, we have all our emotional baggage, but we know the doctors were trying to help us. My doctors were trying to help me. If I was old and I'm having osteoporosis, which is a serious issue, I'm going to be very angry that some doctor at 12 was telling me things that weren't true. It's.
And could I add a kind of a layer to it that I've already seen among, because I work with the Beyond Trans, we have, detrans meetings. I work with a lot of detransitioners and stuff. And many of them only stop transitioning because of medical reasons, the medical complications that you've kind of experienced some of, James. And like I say, I often think, where is their anger? And if they actually are permanently blocked, and so they're effectively permanently an 11-year-old, and they're docile and they're passive, and they haven't learned to have that anger, or they haven't moved beyond the docile child, this idea that they're all going to be detransitioners is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to remain docile subjects of the trans church, effectively, because they have been created that way.
Mm-hmm. They're essentially, part of their humanity has been just not there. It's been taken away from them. So somebody's going to have to speak up for them.
Yeah. Kind of a final question. Is there any book or podcast or other form of media that you would like to recommend to us and our listeners?
What is this? The Paradox Institute was it? That's one. That's one thing. They do lots of stuff on DSDs and stuff like that. And it's a whole nother. It's a whole nother issue. Of course, all your stuff is fantastic, and Beyond Gender. I love Gender Wide Lens. That was some great times there. Okay. Yes. And Stephanie's therapy.
Stephanie Wynn.
And is there anything that gives insight into your specific? Because I think we're going to have a lot of listeners and viewers saying, "I want to hear more about this. I've never thought about this." Anything that, any biography or autobiography or film or anything that gives insight into not having gone through puberty and how it went then?
Let's see here. As far as there's a book called Stuck in Adolescence, which is a book of Stuck in Adolescence, which someone wrote about. See, we're very rare. There's not very many of us.
Yeah.
Well, maybe there's more of us now, but traditionally there wasn't very many of us.
Do you know what the numbers are?
The numbers are one. Women get it at 1 in 100,000. So very rare, my conditional on girls. Men get it about 1 in 80,000. So those are very, very small numbers. It's just, as a matter of fact, all these disordered sex developments. I mean, most of the stuff that's on Twitter and X, we're talking about some of the most rarest conditions that are on the planet. I mean, so that's so it's like you guys are talking about things that never existed, and so a lot of these and all the other people with Turner syndrome and Klinefelter's, when Klinefelter's disease becomes severe, they all have similar things because they've all had difficulties going through puberty. And unfortunately, this trans stuff started and defined us. They defined us before we could define ourselves. So we have to overcome their distortions because they turned us into identities instead of wearing us like they wear women's clothes. So we're wearing our conditions or combining our conditions. And they've got everybody confused about everything, so there's a lot of work to do. So,
well, I so appreciate your bravery and speaking out about this, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. And this has been a fascinating conversation.
Well, thank you, thank you.
I met you first at the conference in Denver, and the GenSpec conference, and you came up to me and you kind of blew my head off. I was really busy and everything was happening, and you came up and spoke, and I went, I need to hear more about that. So you always stuck in my mind. So I'm so glad that we finally got to talk.
Thank you. That was a wild time. Yes. It's nice. It's nice because I have this condition, and I'm like going, well, it's now it's an end thing. I thought I just had this rare condition that I'm never going to be able to talk about, but no, for some reason, this is what we're going through. So,
yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.